Okay, so this session is just going to be on the new mating module. So you might have heard a bit about it for those that are already members, and for those that are new, this is a tool that we're using to help record the reproduction aspects of what's happening in your flock. So it's just about bringing in more information that we can and try and work out why there is the variation in reproduction. So we're going to work through improving accuracies for the reproduction data. So we want to enable greater selection pressure, and by doing that, if you can find out a bit more about why a ewe is performing better or why she might not be as high in a reproductive trait like number of lambs weaned. So yeah, and we're also aiming to improve the number of animals that have reproduction data on it. So looking at a trait like number of lambs weaned, which is a repro trait, where we've got three key pillars here to keep in mind when we're interpreting this trait. So we've got fertility first up, which is fertility is regarding whether the ewe joined or not. So is the ewe fertile? We've got fecundity, so that's scan count or how many lambs she actually has. Okay, so we've already got two things happening to interpret this trait. And then at the end there, we've got lamb survival. So is she able to rear that ewe through to weaning time, rear that lamb through to weaning time or not? So it's not quite as simple as just taking a body weight. There's a lot more things happening here that we need to account for. And the idea of this mating module is to try and hone in why there is that variation in reproduction. So again, we've got fertility, so we want to know how much variation is there in the fertility trait that can be explained from environmental factors, or management factors. Everyone's pretty aware that if you have your ewes in good nick at joining time, you get a better joining result. So that's already just outlining that there is an environmental factor that plays a pretty strong role in why there is why these ewes are joining or why they may not be joining. And as Karis said in the first slide, so for something such as number of lambs weaned versus fleece weight, or fibre diameter, sorry, if you put a fine wool ram over your ewes, that next year, or that drop, you'll noticeably see straight away that there's a finer micron in those lambs out of that fine wool ram. Whereas reproduction, number of lambs weaned, because it's lower heritability, it'll take much longer to improve that trait. And it's all important because the lower the heritability, the more importance it is, the more pressure that you have to put on that particular trait to move it. So yeah, fertility, we've now got that option there to be recording a joining weight and a joining condition score. I'll get to that in a bit more about how to record it and what practices to take out. Fecundity and litter size, so previously we haven't been accepting anything on preg scans. Now we've got that blank space in our analysis for you to send that information in. So if you can get your scanning records and send them in to us, we're able to give you more accurate reproduction data and use that. For an example of in the merinos, we haven't had that opportunity before. We haven't been able to give you the difference from, say, a preg scan result through to weaning. Okay, so we're able to hone in a bit more on why that. Yeah.
Just a question on the preg scan results. Are you saying to a group of ewes joined to a particular sire, or are you talking individual ewes? Individual ewes.
So you can record. We've now got that opportunity per ewe to record how many, if she was had one lamb or two lambs scanned or no. So
yeah, so it's no good recording if you've got 100 ewes joined to a particular ram.
Yep.
And you get, say, 130% scanned in lambs?
No, we want per.
So it's a per animal record. It will have the same sort of filters that apply currently to the repro analysis. So, for example, if you've got ewes that were all joined to one sire, have fallen below, I think for adult ewes it's 70% of them getting in lamb, that would be filtered out with the service sire filter saying it's a problem with the ram, not a problem with the individual ewe. So we will have filters in place for data quality checking basically to make sure that it's not a ram failure instead of the ewe failure, but it's a record against that ewe herself.
I've got the that scanning information on the 2014 pregnant ewes that have lambed and now they're a year old. And it was whether they were scanned in lamb as twins and then had a single or had nothing or had two or whatever. I've got all that information, so I can actually go back and put that information, but I'm only using Pedigree Wizard, I'm not using Pedigree Master.
Keep in mind, you've got to be really confident with that information going back.
I know, it's very accurate. I mean, you know what I mean, like it can't be accurate because there's errors in scanning that happens.
Well, yeah, so we understand that there's always errors with preg scanning, and then you've got things like environmental and disease that happens between scanning and lambing.
Sure.
But, yeah, I think for you, if you do have that information, there is an opportunity for you to go back and send that in now, but you just have to be really confident with it that that's right.
As long as we can identify the groups and so on along the way. So if you've got those records and you have the groups that they will run in leading into each of those measurements, perfect, we can utilise that information. Pedigree Wizard doesn't have the mating module facility available.
I know.
So it's Pedigree Master
or
the commercially available programs that have the facility to do it. We'll come back through and go through the specifics of it shortly.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Yep, and also with that, we've also got the opportunity now for maternal breeders who might be having a sale, having their ram sale at, say, 12 months age or 15 months age. In the past, we haven't had that performance record of reproduction for those rams because they're so young and we can't record fertility information on those animals. We're now able to, if you run through their sisters from the same mobs and from the same size and half sibs, we can interpret that information as reproduction data for that ram. So for those rams that you're selling younger. So if you're joining, say if they were joining at 7 months and getting a preg scan at 10 months of age, and then you sell those ewes brothers at your annual ram sale come 15 months of age, we've actually got a whole lot more information based on their half sibs performance on how those rams will perform for reproduction. Okay, and lamb survival as well. So we've had that in the past, and just a birth type through to rear type. So a few hurdles for us because reproduction is sex limited, so a bit hard to record how many lambs are ram weans. So we've got that barrier already, and it's also a later life trait. So for Merino, probably not finding out how many lambs are used rearing until she's 2 years old. So there's a bit of a barrier there as well. And like I was just saying, so if you are a maternal breeder and have that higher, are able to join a bit earlier, you can find out more information on their half sibs. And it's a lower heritability. So like I was just saying, with the heritability being a lower value, lower heritability means you need more emphasis to move that trait around. So, you know, it'll only take you, well, using these examples, we've got, what's a good one here? Post-weaning weight for merinos at 0.29 for heritability. We look down at number of lambs weaned and it's 0.06, so 6%. So a bit of an idea for what the different heritabilities are there, and I think Karis ran through these before, but like I was saying, can't stress enough that just because it's a lower heritability doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It just means you have to have more emphasis to be able to manipulate that trait within your flock. Okay. So yeah, we've also got the ability to send in a body weight and a condition score at joining, and I'll get to the format of recording that information in a moment. We want to know the joining length that you're putting your rams out for. Okay, so these are all, pardon me, these are all blank spaces we now have for you to send in information to fit in that gap for each animal. So how long was she joined for? How long was the ram out for? It's a pretty key aspect for people doing accelerated lambing. So a lot of Dorper people might be joining twice a year and wanting to record how long they've put their rams out for. So this is helping us paint a picture of how that ewe has performed or what opportunities she's missed or taken up to be joined. So, and they've also got this cool new space, the preg scanning results. So you can send in the date of your scan, the count, and also working on a scanner name. So I'll bring that up in a moment. So hands up for anyone using Pedigree Master at home. There's already a few in here. Patterson's? No? Or Pedigree Wizard then. If you're Wizard, yep, okay. So we've got a few Wizards. So everyone should have upgraded, or as soon as you get home, upgrade to Pedigree Master. We're just going to work on keeping Pedigree Master up to date for time's sakes. So this is a new screen you'll see, and I'll just use Pedigree Master now. I know everyone's got their own software program that they might be using, but the same concepts can be applied to this same screen. So if you've got your own program that you're using at home, everyone that we know of is up to date with this mating module. So if you can upgrade to your latest software version, this will have the room to put this in now. So up the top here, we've got information about your joining. We've got your group. And as you can see, there's a group also over here for preg scan. These two groups, a pretty key aspect of this whole session is that when you're putting in a group for these traits, for these measurements, sorry, it's the group that it was running up until, okay? So I have a few people who once thought they drafted their twinning lambs off to a new paddock, going to go put them in the oats for lambing, just before lambing, because they got twins, and they thought that meant they'd call those a group 2, a separate group from their main group because they were twinning. So that was an effect that happened after preg scanning, so we didn't really need to know about it for this particular trait. So for preg scan, we want to know up until. Okay, so if you're rearing up ewe lambs on a high quality pasture versus your older ewes, that's when you start separating them out. And same with joining, up until joining. What group were they running? Can we compare them with each other? We've also got the sire in and sire out date. Depending on your conception method, we'll want to know a sire out date. This joining information, going back a step, sorry, but with body weight and with body weight and condition scores, that needs to be done on the day of joining. Really important. There's no use to us if it's 4 weeks before the date of joining. That time frame is enough time to have a fair bit of variation there between what's happened when you weighed them and condition scored them and what's happened on the date of joining. So we want it up to date and on the day of joining. Moving on to preg scan up the top here. We want to know multiples if you're scanning for twins or not, or if you were just doing wet or dry. If you are doing wet or dry, it's not actually any use to us. So it might be useful for your records later on, but for our sake of interpreting data and using it through OVIS, the analysis system, we want to know a count. And I mean, if you're going to pay a scanner to come out 50 cents a head, why not pay that 30 cents extra for, I think it's around 80 cents a head for multiples, and have that extra information. So pretty key aspect there that wet and dries, yes, you can put it in, but we're not going to be using it. So we want to know scan count. And again, here's this little space here for operator. I'll bring that up in a moment. Just for you to put in an initial of who your scanner was. And even if you've got your own software program other than Pedigree Master, if you can be recording in a field somewhere who was your preg scanner, we might be able to use that later. And just down here, we've got the lamb results. So that's no different to what you've been using before. Just a sex, birth weight, birth type, rear type, lambing ease, the lamb, 16-digit lamb ID, and what birth group it was in. So for those of you who are using Pedigree Master and Wizard, that information can actually be populated in the main database. So you can go back, you can enter your lambing information here, and then go through a process called populate main database, and it'll actually shift across, and you'll then have those new animals in your main database. And the last point to make on mating module is the ewe and lamb status. So in that drop-down box there are 5 options. So we've got unknown, and again, this is applicable to no matter what software system you've got. We've got unknown for if you don't know the outcome. and this can refer to the ewe or the lamb. And then we've got 2 referring to the lamb, so that's lamb is alive and lamb is dead. And then there's 2 referring to the ewe status, which means there's dry, there's sold, and fertility. So there's actually 6 there, sorry. But the purpose of that is, say if you were to do a preg scan of twins, and then you go through to lambing, and we don't actually see this information for a lambing record, but yet we've been sent information to say this ewe was meant to have twins. We don't see a lamb here. We're going to assume that she lost both those lambs. So if you go down to this status here and update that to sold, or you died and didn't have that opportunity to have the lamb, we can not be scaling down her merit for reproduction.
So the intent is that every ewe that we've got a joining record for, we've got an outcome for the joining. So if she was scanned dry, that's fine, we don't need to put it in further down. If you hadn't done preg scanning, for example, you can use that status field down the bottom to record that ewe was dry that year, instead of going through the old process of putting in a dummy lamb with a tag number DRY 001 and so on.
So we don't need to do dry.
We don't need to do dries, we will still need to do the DABs, the dead at birth lambs.
Okay. Righto. So information that we're now accepting, so we've got the length of joining for a natural mating. We want to know how long that ram was out for. I think I've covered that fairly well. Condition scores. So we want to know whether she was a 5 or a 2 or a 3 or a 3.5. So just trying to get a bit of a grasp on what's out there and what's happened. So maybe we're consistently seeing condition score 5 ewes not getting in lamb, and that's an environmental effect, not an actual fertility effect. So, a genetic effect. So it could be something to do with how one breeder's running their property. So their stocking rates might be a lot lower, a lot higher than in somewhere else. So there's been a lot of conversation about how the reproduction information is interpreted and whether or not it's done correctly. And the purpose of this was just to get as much information as we can about that ewe or about that joining event so that we can properly interpret it.
Assessed on the same guidelines as lifetime ewe management principles. So if you've done any of that condition scoring, that's the scoring system.
So we want it in quarterly intervals, because there's no point if we've only got records saying there were 3 or there are 2 or there are 4. There is a bit of variation there, but if you've got 1,000 ewes, we sort of want to know a bit more about it. So we want in quarters for condition scores, and best practice is to have the same operator doing the entire group. So we're not getting someone swapping over after lunch and doing a different method of measuring. And we're just trying to target that variation. And body weight, we should all be up to speed now that we want 0.5 kilogram intervals. Okay, so I think I've gone through this before. We'll go back to this subgrouping effect. I think I've harped on it enough now. Sorry, we've got a question. Yep.
Before we've been recording DRY and dead at birth lambing, do we no longer have to do that?
So that old information will still be used in the analysis for flocks that are recording this. You won't have to do the DRYs because you can either put in a preg scan of 0, or if you're not preg scanning, you can use that fate down the bottom to say that the ewe was dry that year. The dead at births will still need to record the DABs. A ewe might have scanned in lamb with twins, for example. One of those lambs has survived and one hasn't. So we still need to record those dead lambs along the way. If that ewe, doesn't have lambs being recorded because the only lamb was dead that year, there is an option down the bottom to select that the lamb is dead. But in that case of multiple births where we need to say, one lamb's alive, one lamb's dead, then we'll still need to use that DAB methodology. Yep.
Okay. So again, with your subgrouping, so we really need to know that information about how that ewe was treated up until that event. So that's a really key aspect of this whole process. So like I said, if you're going to be feeding your younger ewes and not your older ewes, we should be separating them out. They've had a different feed ration or the different environment effect, so not fair to be comparing them with each other. Okay. So the preg scan component, we're possibly looking at making an accreditation process. We did flag it with the Preg Scanners Association in December last year, I think it was, and brought it up there, and we didn't have any hesitation for it, so they were quite happy to go through the process of doing an accreditation. So we're just a bit of a blank space at the moment. We're just trying to work out how it's going to pan out and what sort of information we're going to get. So it's probably something we'll look at in 6 months' time once we got a bit more information in there. So quite key that if you are sending scanning information in, you do put a scanner name, just an initial. So if it was John Smith, just J Smith, should be fine. And yeah, we really need that scanning group date. So if you were scanning on the Monday and it took a few days, then you need to be telling us over which days that group was put in. Okay. So you can do wet and dry, but we really need multiples to be using it. So mating module, I'll just fly over these because it's in your printouts that you can look at if you are relevant to using Pedigree Master or Pedigree Wizard. So that's that process I was talking about before of populating the main database and bringing across all the animals that you've entered into the mating module and bringing it across into the main database. So you don't have to double enter all their tags. I think we're right with that one. So this is bringing up that DAB or the dry question before. We do still need to be recording the dead at births. Like Hamish said, it's quite vital to describing what's happening on farm. But yeah, if you are recording a preg scan properly and recording that ewe status properly, we don't need that DRY fictitious lamb entered in.
Dry, and he's going to be number one in that system. Is he that number one taken out of your succession of tags for that year?
Yeah, so you build up.
It's DRY001, so it's all embedded into the last 6 digits.
Yep.
So it will differentiate from having your 14 drop lamb 0001.
Yeah, that's my question.
So
yeah, okay.
it actually looks at that last 6 digits.
Right, yeah.
And the same with the dead at birth. So we want DAB 2 zeros and then 1, DAB 2 zeros 2 as you build up.
Yeah, okay.
So they're still actually an animal, but we're just not using them for any information. We need to know that they're different or how many there were. Okay, wrapping up with the mating module. We really need you to upgrade your software as soon as you can so you can be recording all this new stuff that we're allowing you to send in now. Again, groups, it's up until that date, so up until the scan date or up until joining. Pretty key aspect to grasp. Yeah, so the opportunity's there. So we want as much information as we can, and by jumping on board with it, we're going to be making a whole lot more gain in reproduction, and you'll be able to use those figures more trustworthy, I'd say. Okay.